Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta's Justice Minister has issued an apology for saying Ottawa and the media wanted a healthcare disaster for Alberta. A casting call has gone out in southern Alberta as producers of a highly anticipated HBO series will be looking for extras. And British Columbia has extended its state of emergency. We will explain for how long.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta's Justice Minister offered an apology today on his Facebook page. Earlier this week, Casey Medew accused Ottawa, the NDP opposition, and the mainstream media for wanting a healthcare disaster due to surging COVID-19 cases. Well, the minister has backpedaled and first offered an apology on Twitter a day after his press secretary said the minister had nothing to be sorry for. Now he offered an apology as well on his Facebook post. Minister Medew says, "I'd like to offer an apology for my recent comments on my personal Facebook account. Alberta is facing an unprecedented public health crisis. My comments were wrong, as all Canadians want this global pandemic to end as soon as possible. I fully support the Premier's recent call to avoid the divisive political rhetoric during what we all hope is the final period of this pandemic, and will continue the important work of government in protecting Albertans from the virus." It is National Nurses Week. Now, our local nursing community is currently working through the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Every single hospital floor is impacted, and nurses continue to show up. Like many, nurses have families, and as Ainsley Riley explains, it can be very difficult to balance career and family right now.
National Nurses Week in Lethbridge is usually a time to bring the community together. But this year and the last, the pandemic has halted those gatherings. COVID-19 has put a strain on the entire healthcare system, and frontline workers have been busy.
You don't really escape that burnout, even if you're only working part-time. And every shift is burnout, every shift, no matter how many you work. So I can say that those nurses who are working full-time, I honestly can't imagine that weight on them.
Implement orders, give medications, manage the other patients you have while caring for sick COVID patients.
Tuesday's numbers report that in southern Alberta, there are currently 41 people in hospital and 11 in the ICU. Nurses say that they've had to rely on each other for strength, as the job isn't easy mentally.
It's been challenging. We've seen that both in our nursing, in other disciplines, our EMS. It's just kind of very real.
I know I've had people say, well, I want to see, we should be able to see how many people are in there. There should be a video of it. How do we even know it's real? And sometimes it's very difficult to say, this is my day today. This was real.
3.8 million Albertans are eligible to be vaccinated, and the province is aiming to have half of those vaccinated by the first week of June. Nurses, alongside medical professionals, are urging the public to get their shot.
Vaccinated as soon as you can. I think that's our quickest way out of this, and meeting herd immunity is by as many people getting vaccinated as possible and as quickly as possible.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Medical witnesses to a court case by Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms challenging provincial lockdowns say the PCR test, which the Trudeau Liberals want Canadians to take to prove they're COVID-19 free, is unreliable. According to the Justice Centre, Manitoba Chief Microbiologist and Lab Specialist Dr. Jared Bullard, who was questioned under oath recently, said the PCR test has limitations. The JCCF also says a study from Dr. Bullard and his colleagues found that 56% of positive COVID-19 cases are not infectious. John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, says this finding is significant.
This is the first time that in Canada that we've had government officials in court testifying under oath saying that the PCR test is unreliable, that it was never invented or designed to diagnose COVID, that we've got false positives 56% or even higher. And of course, there have been medical experts have been saying this for the past 13 months, but now we've got a government official in court in Manitoba testifying under oath and telling us that the PCR test is fundamentally untrustworthy and unreliable. And that is, I hope, going to be a game changer, not just in court actions across Canada, but in terms of politicians not using this test as a tool of unscientific fear-mongering.
That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Calgary. Now, when it comes to getting the COVID-19 vaccine, it appears as though the AstraZeneca shot may become harder to get. According to political reporter Brian Lilley, there are two reasons for that. In Alberta, it's a supply issue, but in many other regions of the country, the vaccine has been pulled because of blood clot concerns.
So the Ontario data, originally it was 1 in 1 million, then it became 1 in 125,000, and now it's about 1 in every 60,000. And even though we've only had 8 of these VITT, which essentially comes out to blood clotting, the officials said, you know what, let's suspend using it for first doses. Now, Alberta, well, they actually say it's just about supply, but they're going to get more supply eventually. But they've said, you know what, we're just going to use the Pfizer and Moderna, and if we ever get it, the Johnson & Johnson. I think that blood clotting is part of that, and I think you'll see more provinces step forward and say, we're not going to do this anymore.
Mr. Lilley will have more on COVID-19 vaccines and the latest on the Liberals' Bill C-10, which many consider an attack on free speech. That's coming up later in our newscast. Calgary Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner asked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau if he's planning on getting a second shot of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
The Prime Minister received his first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Will he be getting a second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or 1 dose of Pfizer or Moderna in the future? Which one will it be?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for Nose Hill for her questions about my well-being. Let me assure her that I talked to my doctor just last week, and he recommended that I indeed get a second dose of AstraZeneca in the coming weeks or months when it becomes available, when my turn comes up in the month of Ontario, in the province of Ontario. That is what I am focused on doing. I know there are questions being asked around the world about the data that involves mixing and matching doses. There are no recommendations around that yet, but I know scientists are leaning in carefully to see if it may be the right option for many people.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder is among many Canadians who has a real problem with the Liberals' Bill C-10. She says not only is the bill an attack on our freedom of speech, but it allows the federal government to play favorites when it comes to online content.
The government is going to choose winners and losers. The government is going to choose which people, which artists, which creative individuals get to be promoted based on their government regulated algorithms and which don't. Wow. Okay. So I wonder who they're going to put in place that is going to be responsible for policing the internet and making sure that they look at your content, and then they'll determine just how Canadian it is, and then they'll determine whether it gets to be queued up or queued down.
Some Albertans accused of breaking provincial health restrictions will have to face a judge very soon. Calgary pastor Archer Pawlowski will appear in court on May 20th. He's charged with organizing an illegal in-person gathering and promoting and attending an illegal gathering. Earlier, Bridge City News spoke with Pastor Pawlowski's lawyer, Sarah Miller of JSS Barristers, who's been representing him since last year when he was first ticketed for breaking a public health order.
The justice who heard the hearing, the show cause hearing on Monday morning, he ordered the Pawlowski brothers to be released. The conditions on that release are that they need to comply with justice order, which technically, if there's an order out there that applies to all Albertans, it applies to the Pawlowski brothers. So it's kind of a duplicative condition of release, but no money posted for bail or any type of that kind of condition.
As for the 2 people who organized a No More Lockdowns protest rodeo in central Alberta earlier this month, they say they have been served a court summons. RCMP alleged Ty and Gail Northcott, who are both from Bowden, contravened the province's Public Health Act. The arrests of Alberta pastors James Coates and Archer Pawlowski have caused division amongst Albertans and the Christian community. Both pastors were arrested for allegedly breaking public health orders by hosting and promoting in-person worship services. Lethbridge pastor Rohan Crown shares from biblical history how Coates and Pawlowski are not the first to be jailed, and they won't be the last.
If you look at scripture, you see that obviously Paul was jailed, Peter was jailed. If you look at Acts chapter 16, you have the famous example of Peter and Silas. They actually were jailed for casting out a demon from a slave girl. But not once have they been asked to stop preaching the gospel or proclaiming the gospel. Paul at that time was arrested for casting out a demon. And so his response was, hey, I'm in prison. Let's praise Jesus in prison. So that's how I take that.
Now, our poll question this week is, do you agree with pastors being arrested and charged with breaking public health orders? Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let your voice be heard. We'll tabulate the results and have them for you on Friday evening's newscast. Lethbridge City Council approved around $3.5 million a year toward a new curbside organics green bin program for 2022 to 2031. The motion, sponsored by Councillor Jeffrey Carlson, passed by a narrow margin of 5-4 at the Economic Standing Policy Committee. The green bin program will also require the city to borrow $10.6 million to build a facility to handle the organics at the Waste and Recycling Centre by the year 2023. Will also require a $7 increase to residential utility charges. The city says the new initiative could reduce waste into the community black bins by as much as 57%. You may have noticed prices of commodities going up recently. Gasoline and lumber come to mind, and you can also add canola to that list. BCN's Naveen Day spoke with experts in the canola industry to find out what's causing the surge.
It's becoming the Bitcoin of the agriculture industry, canola. Before last weekend, its price reached record highs before slowly coming down. But what caused the surge? Ward Toma, who is the general manager of the Alberta Canola Producers Commission, says it's a classic supply and demand scenario.
We have good, strong demand globally and within Canada for canola seed at a time of the year where there's not necessarily a lot left over because of previous sales and shipments. We had some lower than usual production in some parts of the prairies last year. So combine that with similar type of situations in the global veg oil complex, soybeans, and some parts of the world, the United States, South America, same kind of situation.
And while China's embargo on Canadian canola has affected our farmers, the demand for our product didn't suffer too terribly. Canada continued to export to China, as well as find new markets in Europe.
They have an embargo against 2 companies for sales of seed to those 2 companies. Other companies were able to make sales of seed over time, meeting the conditions that China was asking for. China was still buying canola oil and canola meal from Canadian companies. So those sales went up. So that demand still managed to find its way to Canada.
We've also, through some of the trials and tribulations that we've had the past couple of years, we've opened up some biofuel demand in Europe, and there's a lot of product going that direction.
Last year, biofuel consumed almost 28% of global total canola oil production. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
A recent announcement by the Alberta government has meant thousands of Alberta students have had to make the switch to online learning. The Taber Safe Haven Women's Shelter has started an initiative to provide kids in the community with free lunches. The society has packed up meals for kids and dropped them off at various houses. The executive director of the society, Catherine Champagne, says the program is free and anyone can sign up.
I personally even know a lot of parents that, are having to leave their kids at home to not only be home alone, but also learn at home. And that can be a challenge. So if we can alleviate one thing, which is making sure they eat every day at lunch, we thought that would be a great idea. We wanted it to be as streamlined as possible. And then our team delivers the lunches unless someone's interested in picking them up. But for the most part, we just deliver them, drop them off, and go on from there.
Champagne says the deliveries can also be made to kids outside of Taber. A popular video game will be making its way to TV audiences around the world. The Last of Us will start filming in southern Alberta in July. As Micah Quinn explains now, a casting call has been put out for anyone from southern Alberta area who would like to be an extra on the show.
The Last of Us follows the characters Joel and Ellie as Joel is tasked with escorting the young girl across a post-apocalyptic environment to bring her to another group of fighters. The Last of Us has sold over 20 million copies. The game was so successful that HBO decided to make it into a TV show. A casting call was recently put forward asking for Southern Albertans to send in applications to play extras for the upcoming show.
People of all ethnicities, all ages, they're going to be shooting over the course of a whole next year from July to July. So there will be more casting calls, but they wanted to cast a wide net to see who's interested in the province and make sure that they're hiring locals, because I know that's a big thing for the film industry is hiring locals throughout the province.
Keep Alberta Rolling made a post on Facebook boosting the casting call, and thousands of people have already applied. Skretting says that this show will have a huge impact on the tourism industry in Alberta.
We know that film tourism is a big thing, so we want to make sure that we're working on developing that as well, and just promoting that, so that when the world opens back up, people put Alberta to the top of the list.
For more information on the Last of Us TV show casting call, you can visit the Keep Alberta Rolling Facebook page. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
BC has once again extended a provincial state of emergency, allowing it to use health measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Premier John Horgan says the extension will remain in effect until May 25th. The original state of emergency declaration was made on March 18th, the day after Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry declared a public health emergency. Since then, the province has used legal means to issue multiple orders, including wearing masks, limiting gatherings, and preventing travel outside of the 3 main health regions. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says his government plans to have second doses of COVID-19 vaccines available to everyone in the province by the middle of July. So far, around 40% of Canadians are vaccinated with at least a first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Saskatchewan is running ahead of national numbers, with around 50% of adults having already received their first dose. Moe says the province expects to start administering second doses later this month.
Very shortly, we will begin delivering second doses, and everyone needs to make sure that you get your second dose to ensure that ultimately you are fully protected from this virus. Pretty soon, we are going to have a lot of people in Saskatchewan that are fully vaccinated. So I would like to see the federal government provide some guidance and possibly some direction and maybe even a roadmap on what being fully vaccinated means in terms of things like travel. For example, will fully vaccinated Saskatchewan residents, and ultimately many Canadians, still be required to quarantine for 2 weeks when they return to Canada from another country?
Well, it was a beautiful day for riding a bike today. We enjoyed another gorgeous day in southwestern Alberta. Just a few clouds and we got over 10 degrees once again. And the warmer temperatures will continue. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. It was a beautiful day to take a stroll around Henderson Lake. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at our weather forecast. Jeanette, it was warm today, but later this week and into the weekend, it'll feel even more like summer.
Yes, that's true, Hal, particularly as we look to Friday and then even to Sunday and next Monday. We're certainly going to see those beautiful temperatures feeling like summertime. We just have to kind of get through those intermittent days of showers. So we're kind of having shower activity appear for one day, then not the next, then the next day and not the next. So that's what we're kind of dealing with right now, including tomorrow. We're looking at a 40% chance of showers, possibility of a thunderstorm tomorrow afternoon, high of 18 for Thursday. Friday, here's where we get into that 20-degree day. 18 on Saturday with another chance of rain there. Into Sunday though and Monday, look at those temperatures, 23 on Sunday, 26 on Monday. And as we get into Tuesday, as we round out that 7-day forecast, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers for next Tuesday. So yeah, we're kind of on and off again with the precipitation, but we are starting to get higher than that seasonal average of 18 degrees, which is great news, feeling more like summertime. Our average low for this time of year, 4 degrees. 30 was our high temperature back in 1960, and it was -7 back in 1983. Sun rose this morning at 5:51 a.m. and our sunset this evening is 9:05 p.m. Loving these long days. Let's look to the west coast. We're looking at sunshine tomorrow for Victoria, high of 19 degrees. A little bit windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait. 18 in Vancouver, lots of sunshine as well. Edmonton and Calgary both going to have days similar to Lethbridge with that 40% chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm in the afternoon. 20 degrees the high in Edmonton tomorrow and 17 is the high in Calgary tomorrow. As we look to the rest of the prairies, seeing lovely conditions, 22 the high in Saskatoon with a mix of sun and clouds, sunshine in Regina tomorrow with a high of 21. It's just Winnipeg that's going to get the rain tomorrow. High of 21 degrees there as well. Now looking at Toronto, sunshine, 20 degrees is the high, 21 in Ottawa with sunny skies as well. 40% chance of showers in Montreal, high of 19 degrees, but not too bad for the central part of the country. Definitely starting to feel like summer there as well. As we look to the East Coast, we are seeing some rain activity in Fredericton and Halifax. Fredericton's high tomorrow, 19, 15 in Halifax, 11 in Charlottetown with beautiful sunny skies, mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 9 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
The U.S. District Court in Michigan has received another legal brief in support of keeping the Enbridge cross-border Line 5 pipeline open. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer gave the Calgary-based company until today to shut down the pipeline. She said she feared an environmental catastrophe in the Straits of Mackinac, where Line 5 crosses the Great Lakes. The American and Canadian Chambers of Commerce argue there would be severe consequences if the line running through Michigan is shut down. Ottawa is launching a host of programs to bolster airports with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. The federal government opened the door to $740 million in capital investments for airports over the next 6 years. It is laying out criteria for the hard-hit facilities and to apply for aid. About $490 million of that windfall is bound for large airports to supply runway repairs and transit stations. The rest will be headed to smaller airports. Canadian Airports Council President Daniel Robert Gooch says the support is welcome, but the $500 million for large airports falls well short of the aid required. Britain's foreign secretary is urging global cooperation to combat cyber attacks by hostile state actors and criminal gangs. Dominic Raab pledged $31 million US in supporting countries in the Indo-Pacific region and Africa to improve their digital defense capacity. He says the West must step up on the issue or face what he called the multilateral vacuum being fueled by both China and Russia. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 166 points in the day to finish at 19,108. The Dow was down 681 points to 33,588. The S&P 500 was down 89 points to 4,063, and the Nasdaq was down 357 points on the day to 13,032. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 46 cents to 65.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 2.98 US. Gold was up 23 cents to 18.15.92 US an ounce, and silver was even at 27.02 US an ounce. Wheat is at $357 per metric ton, barley's at $360, canola's at $906, and corn is at $412 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 3 cents to $118.60, feeder cattle were up $1.43 to $136.75, and lean hogs were up 33 cents to $111.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 82.44 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, some Albertans accused of breaking provincial health restrictions will have to face a judge soon. Calgary pastor Archer Pawlowski will appear in court on May 20th. He's charged with organizing an illegal in-person gathering and promoting and attending an illegal gathering. RCMP say 2 people who organized a No More Lockdowns protest rodeo in central Alberta earlier this month have been served a court summons. Police allege Ty and Gail Northcott, who are both from Bowden, contravened the province's Public Health Act. Certain regions of the country have stopped using the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lillley will have all of the details as to why in just a moment. While the federal government continues to say take the first COVID-19 vaccine shot you're offered, Ontario has joined Alberta in suspending the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine for concerns over blood clotting. To talk about this in more detail is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lillley from the Toronto Sun. Brian, what really changed their minds? I thought the blood clots were extremely rare.
They are still extremely rare, but they've become less rare. So the Ontario data, originally it was 1 in 1 million. Then it became 1 in 125,000. And now it's about 1 in every 60,000. And even though we've only had 8 of these VITT, which essentially comes out to blood clotting, the officials said, you know what? let's suspend using it for first doses. Now, Alberta, well, they actually say it's just about supply, but they're going to get more supply eventually. But they've said, you know what, we're just going to use the Pfizer or Moderna, and if we ever get it, the Johnson & Johnson. I think that blood clotting is part of that. And I think you'll see more provinces step forward and say, we're not going to do this anymore. So, you know, we're looking at about 650,000 doses, I hear, could be available by the end of the month across the country, and then 1 million in June. But I just don't see those being used except for second doses because, you know, roughly 2 million people have got them, and they may want to stay the course, although even that right now, Hal, is up in the air.
Well, I wanted to ask you, so the 2 million Canadians who received the original shot of the AstraZeneca vaccine, what's going to happen with them? Are they going to come back and say, you know what, I'm going to hold off. Maybe I'm going to go with the Moderna or the Pfizer when it comes to my second shot?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people looking for information out of a UK study on mixing and matching. And at this point, I will say that I'm glad I did not get the AstraZeneca vaccine. I still think that it would be safe for me. I still would get 2 doses of it if I could. But since it doesn't look like that, and since it looks like the federal government and the provinces are going to start saying, you know what, your second dose, you're getting Pfizer or Moderna, I don't like the idea of mixing and matching. And they might tell me it's safe, but hey, they said there were no problems taking AstraZeneca before. These guys keep changing their minds. It's not going to help with vaccine hesitancy. And that's important because, you know, as we'll talk about in a moment, the PM says, got to get a whole bunch of you vaccinated before we can do anything else. So, you know, I think there's going to continue to be confusion. I know a lot of people who got the AZ shot, people my age, in their 40s, they're happy they did. But I'm sure I've spoken to others who now have a bit of buyer's remorse at being told you got the inferior one and we're not using it anymore.
Well, I know in some of the health officials in China, they said, just kind of mix them all in together and then you're definitely covered. Just throw them all in together, you know, we'll see what happens.
No thanks, no thanks.
Now, Brian, with the new provincial health restrictions, attendance at churches in Alberta here is down to 15 people, 10 for funeral homes, funeral services. Outdoor patios have been shut down at restaurants. You know, many are not happy about it. In Ontario, there's been a stay-at-home order for about a month, which is supposed to end, I believe, on May 20th. But will it?
No, it's going to be extended. There's no doubt about that right now. And it's not just case counts. You know, I know some people are constantly yelling at me, the case counts are amplified, the PCR threshold is too high, this is a scamdemic. What can't be faked is the fact that there are people in hospitals and ICUs, and that's what's really driving the desire to keep things closed. Do we have to keep everything closed? I think there's a solid argument and evidence that says this is not the only way to deal with it, but it is the overwhelming way that provincial governments across the country have chosen to deal with it. And Ontario has locked down more than BC, more than Alberta, more than Saskatchewan. It's a debate about whether Ontario or Quebec has the strictest lockdowns, but the public tend to support them here, unlike in Alberta. So yeah, we're at the situation where religious services are severely restricted, but plane loads of people flying across the country or in from outside of the country, that's just fine. And in those situations, you're cheek to jowl with each other, never mind being restricted to 10 or 15. But don't worry, Hal, it's all based on science. So no golfing in Ontario, no school for in-person learning for the foreseeable future in Ontario, probably at-home virtual learning until next September.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. Here in Alberta, of course, Premier Kenney says some of the restrictions, including at-home learning from K through grade 12, will continue until after the May long weekend. How are Ontarians handling the lockdown restrictions there? I know here, anxiety and depression rates are going through the roof.
I was just looking at a Maru public opinion research survey, and they asked people, they gave them 11 positive and 11 negative feelings and said, which ones most match you? And the top 3 were frustrated, anxious, and bored. So that was 1, 2, and 3. And those were more than 35, about 36 to 39% of the population said, this matches my mood. The first positive feeling was tied at number 4, and that was, I feel fortunate. So people that have jobs that say, well, I still feel fortunate. I'm lucky I have a job. As many of us do not have jobs anymore across the country. We all know some people in that situation. But right behind that was, so I did isolated. People are feeling isolated. 35% of the population saying that. this is, regardless of where you are in the country, we are social beings. We are social creatures, and that being cut off hurts everyone. There was another survey just recently saying that 47% of mothers with children at home are at the breaking point. So eventually something will have to give. Thankfully, the weather's getting better. We're able to get outside. Maybe you can't play golf. Maybe you can't play tennis, at least here in Ontario, but you can get outside and see a bit of sunshine, breathe in a bit of fresh air.
Alberta's Justice Minister Casey Medu says the restrictions were needed to help stop the spike here in the province. He says if the Kenney government didn't bring in the new restrictions, Brian, then hospitals would be overrun, which is what Ottawa would have wanted. He not only said Ottawa, but the official opposition, Rachel Notley, and the NDP, and as well mainstream media. But when it comes to Ottawa, has Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded to that comment from our Justice Minister Casey Medu?
He rejects the idea that the federal government is hoping for Alberta to fail, that the media or others are hoping for Alberta to fail. I can't say that I disagree with him. I'm not going to agree with everything Casey Medu said in his statement, but there is an inordinate amount of attention paid to Ontario and Alberta, especially when things start going badly. When things are going well, the national media does not pay attention. But when these two provinces, led by strong, well-known conservatives, are, dealing with the worst parts of COVID, when they're struggling, then it becomes an all-out assault. So if Casey Medu is feeling like everyone's out to get him, it doesn't make him paranoid. It makes him tuned into what's happening.
Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also says COVID-19 restrictions must remain in place, Brian, until at least 75% of Canadians get their first shot. Then he says we can have a one-shot summer. What exactly is a one-shot summer? And doesn't that kind of go against what the provinces are planning on?
One-shot summer, it sounds an awful lot like a Bananarama song from the 80s called Cruel Summer. If these restrictions have to stay in place until 75% of us have the vaccine, I can tell you here in Ontario, and it's roughly the same, they're all within a few points of each other. Here in Ontario, we're about to cross over, or have just crossed over today, 50% of the adults 18 and over having at least one shot. We've got to get another 25%. If restrictions have to stay in place for that long, then the stay-at-home order in Ontario is going to be in place far beyond the projected date of freedom that I had suggested, which was June 3rd. It will be extended past that. I know some doctors are already advising the Ford government to extend the stay-at-home order into July and August. That's the way some public health officials view this. But the PM says this and expects that the provinces will follow his wishes. An hour after he says this, or an hour or two, Francois Legault, the Premier of Quebec, comes out and announces, well, we're going to resume in-person learning and we're going to open up retail and we're loosening restrictions. If that had been Doug Ford or Jason Kenney, to go back to my earlier comments, especially around Casey Medu, there would have been a national media uproar. Quebec can do what Quebec wants, and Quebec can have the worst death rate in the first and second waves, and nobody's caring, nobody's noticing, and it's all fine. Anything that Alberta and Ontario do gets far more scrutiny, including from the national media and the PM.
Brian, you talked about hitting the links earlier. Let's go back and chat about golf once again. Millions of Canadians love playing golf. I mean, it's good exercise, fresh air, players are able to physically distance. Why are golf courses such a big issue where you are in Ontario when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis?
Because we have a stay-at-home order and they've shut down schools. And so the lines that the government will give you when you ask them about this is, how does it make sense to have a stay-at-home order to close the outdoor recreational activities, including basketball courts, and then say, but you know what, if you golf, just fine, book a tee time. They want people to stay home. And think of the message that it would send that they've locked off, municipalities have locked off basketball courts, taken down beach volleyball nets, but you got a bunch of well-to-do old guys out golfing. That would send exactly the wrong message. Beyond that, Dr. David Williams, the chief medical officer here, has said that it's not necessarily always the activity, it's the travel to get to the activity, and it's what people do around it, like gathering at the trunk of the car at the end for a beer because the 19th hole is closed. So you all gather around the car, nobody has the masks on, nobody's social distancing anymore, and you're having the beer. They said that's what happened, and we had some super spreader hockey events go on back in the winter. That's what happened then. They don't want that happening now. I'll tell you how. The golfers have been the most adamant group that they must be allowed to play. They are the most vocal group of any organization, any group of people I've dealt with during this pandemic, second only to teachers. And I think, you know, I've been speaking out against all of these closures, businesses being shut down, people being thrown out of work, and none of these people spoke up. Suddenly you take their tea time away, and it's like the world has ended. If they were willing to speak up for the small businesses being oppressed, I'd be fine with it. But I'm really actually getting annoyed that these people were silent during that time. They were fine with all the lockdown restrictions until you took away their tea time. If losing a tea time is the worst thing that's happened to you in this pandemic, you ain't suffering.
Brian, there's a big fight brewing between the Canadian government and the governor of Michigan, and it involves a pipeline. Michigan is trying to shut down Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline. Now, that would not only hurt Alberta, but also you in Ontario.
I think it's 40 to 50%, or is it higher, of all the jet fuel used at Pearson comes from via Line 5. So it comes into Sarnia, Ontario, where it is processed and turned into jet fuel and then trucked onto the airport. So if this shuts down, the airplanes may shut down, or they'll have to find a new way to get the jet fuel processed in Sarnia. Maybe they'll be sending it by rail. Governor Whitmer in Michigan just really doesn't want this pipeline to go forward, which is strange because other parts of her government have been giving approvals for replacing certain parts of the pipeline that runs under the Straits of Mackinac. You know, the pipeline spends most of its time in Canada, but in order to get to southern Ontario, southwestern Ontario, it cuts under the Straits of Mackinac, goes across Michigan, and then into Ontario that way. It's a bit of a shortcut. The governor, you know, they've passed this shutdown order. They're not enforcing it. But if this is upheld, if it's, you know, mediation doesn't work, if the 1977 Pipelines Treaty is not invoked, if the Biden administration doesn't step in, then yeah, we are in for a lot of trouble here in Ontario and even out toward parts of Quebec. It's a good thing that it's not winter because an awful lot of people, especially in rural areas, still heat their homes with propane and with oil, both of which are products that are, you know, the oil that comes through the pipeline is broken down into those the home heating oil and propane. So it's lucky this is happening in summer, and we might have a bit more wiggle room.
Brian, the fight over Bill C-10, which is being dubbed as the Internet Censorship Bill, continues. There's been a lot of opposition to it. Have the Trudeau Liberals backed down at all?
Not really. They have and they haven't. So they're still defending this bill and saying this has to go forward, and they maintain that it will not end up, you know, having the government curating your social media feeds or regulating Granny's cat videos or even the, you know, a successful YouTube or the things like that. But they're also saying that, yes, if you are getting a lot of traffic on a platform like YouTube, then you should be regulated. So someone that's just making videos at home and posting them to YouTube, and because they're popular, now you're going to be treated like CTV or CBC or Global, the big broadcasters, or like you. I mean, you've dealt with the CRTC most of your career. You know, it can be a heavy hand. So they've agreed to do what's called a, you know, check the constitutionality of the bill with some experts and hear from some other witnesses. But they are still determined to see this bill passed and passed quickly. I think the whole thing has to be scrapped.
Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lillley, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
The COVID-19 pandemic with its restrictions has certainly altered our normal routines and recreational pursuits. Now, one of the interesting fallouts has been an increase in people buying collectibles such as hockey cards, which was very popular when I was a kid. Joining me now to talk about it is Grant Gatto. He's the manager of Pirates Cove, a collectibles and memorabilia store located right here in Lethbridge. Grant, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
Now, are you seeing the same thing here in southern Alberta? Have you had more people come in looking for trading cards right now?
Oh, very much so. We got our store here and our store in Strathmore. We've noticed an increase in both places. I think a lot of people are stuck at home. They're either digging their old collections out of the closet or they're binging some old media that's spurring the urge on again.
You know, it's funny, I think I must have around 600 or 700 hockey cards, a lot of the old mid to late 70s O-Pee-Chees. Are they still pretty hot right now, a hot item, the O-Pee-Chees?
They are very much so. And the problem with a lot of that, though, is everybody's digging that out of their closet. And the Chinese factories that make all the supplies for it, they've been shut down. So there's been a back order for almost every single supply industry wide for the last year, too, because so many people are getting back into it.
You know, maybe I should bring some of my cards into you then. You can appraise them and maybe I can sell some of them to you too.
We'd love to see them, for sure.
So outside of just being stuck at home and maybe reliving some great memories from the past as kids, why do you think people are collecting a lot of these cards right now and other memorabilia right now?
Well, there's a little bit of extra money rolling around with the benefits checks. We've noticed that the money definitely flows that way. And there's some people that are out of work and they're hoping for making a little side money on it too. If you've had something that's been in the closet for 10 years, you need some extra bucks. Yeah, it's time to part with it.
How about in the closet for 45 years? You know, it's funny. I have this collection.
Even better.
I have this collection of O-Pee-Chees that are rounded on the corners and they're autographed. Like it's, you know, like
Nice.
Daryl Sittler, Lanny McDonald, you know, Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, Rogie Van Shawn. You know, there's a set of 21. They were all autographed,
Excellent.
not like original autographs, of course, but from the factory, right? I guess that might be worth a
Yeah.
few bucks.
Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of people trying to finish those sets. So bring those in if you're interested in parting with them.
Now, I heard something recently I was reading a story about a Wayne Gretzky rookie hockey card that brought in over $1 million.
Yeah, that's when you get into the graded cards. When you send with some collectibles, you have the option of getting them graded. So you can send it away to a professional. They'll review it, analyze it, appraise it, and put on a scale of 1 to 10 on, or depending on the industry, coins are a little different, on how good that is. That particular Gretzky was a perfect 10 out of 10, best one that's ever been graded or checked. So that one's a bit of an anomaly. Normally they go for about $1,500 to $2,000-ish, depending on shape.
So is Gretzky still a popular card, regardless if it's a rookie card or not?
Yeah, Gretzky, at the last time I checked and I was pricing some stuff out, he has over 52,000 individual different hockey cards. So somebody could just collect Gretzky, go broke, and still not even be a tenth of the way there.
So what are some of the other big names that people are looking to collect outside of Gretzky? Maybe a Bobby Orr rookie card? How about Guy Lafleur, Daryl Sittler, some of those other names?
You can't go wrong with any of the Hall of Famers. There's always going to be a market for those guys. But there's so many new rookies every year. There's a new crop coming up, and that keeps the hobby going fresh.
Now, outside of hockey cards, how about maybe football or baseball or even basketball cards?
Running into the same supply issue problems with those. They're heavily collected. They're underproduced right now, and whatever's being made is getting picked up by scalpers and flipped on eBay. The stuff that we can find, it's just the crazy high-end stuff where $300 or $400 a pack, you get 2 cards in it. But it's really, really nice stuff to make up for it.
You know, it's funny, I'm just thinking back to a lot of these rare hockey cards I had, and I put them into the spokes of my bicycle when I was a kid, you know, and now here we are 40 years later, these things could probably pay off the mortgage to my house if I would have taken better care of them, right?
I am glad you did that, and I'm glad for all the mothers that threw away the collections, because I wouldn't be in business if everybody kept their stuff. It wouldn't be worth anything.
Now, Grant, you also have a great selection of Hot Wheels vehicles. You know, it's not just kids, but a lot of adults. I mean, I've been into your shop and I purchased a 65 Fastback Mustang Hot Wheel to add to my little collection as well. Are Hot Wheels still a hot item?
Oh, for sure. For sure. They're priced perfect for collectors. $2 a car. They're priced perfect for kids. And the way that they're marketed too, they've got the mainline ones, hundreds of different options a year. You could collect all those and not get into the higher end stuff. Now, Hot Wheels also have what they call treasure hunt cars. And when a store gets a case of 72 cars, only one in there is going to be marked as a treasure hunt car. And they usually have a little flame symbol on there to show you what you're after. And those are highly sought after. And there's even one step above super treasure hunts that the the collectors go crazy for. They come with real rubber tires and fancier metal flake paint jobs.
Grant, would you say that maybe some of the muscle cars, like the American muscle cars, are a hot item? Some of the Mopars, the Chargers, you know, the Challengers, and then also the Mustangs and Camaros?
Definitely. In the Hot Wheels and in the bigger 1/18 scale cars too, the muscle cars in the bigger scale, you definitely can't keep in stock. And that's another one where they'll produce a batch and then you don't get your 65 Mustang, you better hope that somebody saved it on their shelf and is willing to part with it.
I saw as well there was a Mustang, I think it was a VW bus with a surfboard on it that went for over, was it over $100,000 or something? One Hot Wheel?
Yeah, the original releases, they call them the Sweet 16 cars, and there's some crazy little variations where they might have ran out of paint at the factory, so we'll just finish up the day with this other paint and call it good. But 40, 50 years later, those cars from the end of the batch are rare as heck and very, very expensive.
Now, what about some of the other types of toy cars, like dinky cars? Are they still quite popular, or is there more Hot Wheels?
There's so many different ones. Hot Wheels is good for the average collector, but the older collectors, they love getting into the dinky toys. Any of the older Matchbox, the Lesney toys. Yeah, there's always going to be a market for those. And the trick is finding them in good shape, because most of them spent the last 40 years buried in a garden someplace.
You know, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've seen some people that have, you know, antique toys still in the box, never been touched by human hands, which are worth a fortune. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, what a sad childhood. You never had a chance to play with your toy, right?
Open it and play with it. Even when I sell something expensive here, a mint-in package transformer from the 1980s, I tell a person, open it, put the stickers on it, enjoy it. That's what it was meant for. You're the last buyer. That's what it's, you know, enjoy it.
So what are some of the older toys you have in your store there, Grant?
It's always changing. We rely on trades for a lot of stuff, so it's kind of whatever comes through the door. We've had a lot of old tin toys from the early 1900s come through here. I remember having a little toy wind-up boat with a propeller on the end of it. It was from about the 1940s, and every single time I picked that up, it drew blood. Every corner on it was razor sharp, and it was a children's toy from back in your grandpa's day. It's a miracle they made it to this age.
Wow. How about for the ladies and the young ladies too, like classic Barbies? I bet you they're fetching a good penny too, some of the dolls.
They are. We don't have many come through here though, unfortunately. I don't know if that stuff ends up in the antique shops or not. I wouldn't turn it away if it did come in, but yeah, few and far between, I hate to say. I think a lot of the Barbie collectors, they hold on to it forever. I don't blame them.
How about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? That was also pretty big when I was a kid. Is it popular now?
Not as much as it used to be, but anytime we get some of the old vintage toys, even the loose ones, out of package, missing all the accessories, I'll throw them in the dollar bin and they'll be gone the same day. People want them just to put on the shelf because they probably lost the accessories that quick when they were a kid anyway, so it looks just like they remembered.
How about some Star Wars memorabilia? Do you have much of that too?
Lots and lots of Star Wars stuff. It's been suffering the last couple of years since Disney took over. They really hurt the brand, unfortunately. It probably dropped about to 10% of what it was before. Hopefully, the way the Mandalorian's been going is picking things back up and salvaging that. But thankfully, Star Trek is on a second and third renaissance, and it's bringing in a lot of collectors too.
You know, I joke with a lot of my buddies too. I said there were only 3 Star Wars movies: Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. There was nothing else after that. They're like, "Oh, you've missed out on so many great movies, Hal." You know,
and lots of good books.
Oh yeah. Now speaking of which, let's talk about comic books. What kind of old comic books are people really interested in?
The comic books. It's another one where, unfortunately, a lot of the industry is shifting towards digital. Like, you buy a new comic now, and almost all of them come with another digital copy that you can download and read on your phone. That way you can grab the original, bag it away, and put it in the closet and never have to touch the thing. But I think that kind of goes against the spirit of comics. So we always sell our comics half price, even the old ones. We want to get the young collectors in there and keep them interested. And if you can trick a kid into reading with a comic book, not a bad thing either. So
I'm wondering if maybe some of the comic books went up in value with the release of some of these Marvel and DC movies.
They definitely did. I had an Iron Man #1 issue, and it booked in at $80, and it sat on my shelf for probably 4 years and didn't move. The movie came out, and just for giggles, I checked the price. It jumped to $1,000.
Wow.
I changed the price to $1,000. It sold within a week.
Wow. That is amazing. That's a pretty good profit. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I get for carrying it for 35 years.
Well, I guess if you spread it out over that period of time, you're right. Grant, how about old coins? Do you carry many of those?
Yeah, lots of old coins. We got to rely on trade because coins you can't really order from a supplier. You have to wait for Grandpa's coin collection to come in here, but we specialize in that. And with silver doing a bit of a run or two commodity wise, it's hard to keep in stock. So we're always looking for people to bring in their coin collections.
Instead of just old collectible coins, what about coins that have been discontinued? Let's say the German Deutschmark. I've got a whole bunch of those at home, and maybe some Italian lira that no longer exist. Are they worthless, or are they actually worth some money?
Kids love them because they're like pirate treasure. We've got a great big bin of 3 for $1 coins, and that's where all my weird foreign stuff goes. And kids will get a great big bag, and it's cheap as heck to get out of here. And they got a pretty good fancy collection. Because a lot of those coins, especially the foreign ones, are really neat.
What are some of the more unusual items that you carry that collectors may be interested in?
We've had some weird things come through here. I've had some coal brought up from the wreck of the Titanic. Little Aztec statue and a meteorite. I wanted to rub them together and see if I got superpowers, but the boss advised me against that one.
That's good. Now, do you have a lot of regulars who come in, usually, picking up items from you, maybe selling you items at the same time? Kind of like what we see with Pawn Stars, when people go in and they're always buying and selling from Rick and the guys? Not that you have a pawn shop, you've got a collector's shop, obviously, but,
We've got a nerdy version of that. I don't take offense to that, because, we got to get our stuff from somewhere, and it's people bringing them in.
So if a viewer has some old stuff, like we mentioned, sitting in the garage or maybe tucked away somewhere in an old desk, cards, coins, comics, magazines, they shouldn't throw them away. They should maybe give you a call, see if something you might be interested in purchasing.
Oh, for sure. You never know what has value. One person's trash is another person's collectible. So, bring it in, especially if it's something that's been sitting in there for, years. There's a fine line between collector and hoarder. So maybe somebody will appreciate better than you. Bring it in. We'll definitely give you better than a garage sale for it, and we'll find somebody who will appreciate it properly.
So how do you actually figure out the value on it? Let's go back to some of the hockey cards, because we're Canadian. We love hockey here in Canada. Let's say I bring in my Joe Sakic. I've got a rookie Joe Sakic. I've got a rookie Matt Sundin. I've got a rookie Ed Belfour. Do you actually look it up? Do you have a guide where you look up the pricing?
Oh, yeah. The good thing about cards is since 1990, there's been a magazine come out called The Beckett, and it's pretty much the Bible on anything close to cardboard. We just look up the price on there, what the price is on there, and then we go back and forth and find something comfy.
And to make sure that a card's in good shape, so the corners should not be bent at all, I guess, no creases in it.
Yeah, they want to be as crisp and perfect and fresh out of the pack as possible. But when you get to the older cards, that's just not possible. So you got to have a little bit of leeway for that. A lot of them were cut really, really crooked right from factory, because a lot of them were hand cut instead of machine cut. You might see the picture or part of the card next to it bleeding over onto it. You got to have some leeway for that. You're not going to get your $1 million Gretzky, but if you have a dog-eared Gretzky, you still got several $100s. So,
and I guess we shouldn't laminate it either, right? Because that may damage the card.
No, definitely not. That's a hard no. We've had so many good ones come through here, and it's just heartbreaking because they'll either take a hole punch and then pin it up to their bedroom walls, or laminate it or tape it into a book, into a photo album, and it cooks the card, but maybe it'll fill somebody's set for a lot cheaper than buying a mint version would be.
Okay, before I let you go, I got to ask you one more thing. I'm a big fan of lava lamps. Are they still popular? Are they making a comeback? Please tell me they're making a comeback, lava lamps. Not the blue and the yellow ones. I'm talking about the red ones, right? They actually look like lava.
They never went away. My son has one for a night light that, we just bought them a couple weeks ago, and it's fantastic.
That is awesome. Glad to hear that. Thanks so much for joining us today and the trip down memory lane, Grant. I really appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Grant Gatto, he's the manager of Pirates Cove Collectible Shop here in Lethbridge. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for joining us.